This video is brought to you by PrizePicks. Over the weekend, we got to see the start of Brown's rookie camp. And rookie camp is always, I feel like, an interesting time because it's the first time that we get these rookies into the building. We also figure out who has contracts, who hasn't. Right now, the Browns have contracts with 8 of their 10 draft picks. So the Browns have signed 8. The only draft picks that have not been signed yet are Quincy, who is at rookie minicamp, even though he's not signed, which is normal, and Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, who also is at minicamp, even though he's not signed. This can go on until maybe even camp. A lot of times when somebody's not signed before rookie minicamp, it usually goes on till about camp. It's not going to be a big deal if they're not signed right before camp. Like it usually happens, and oftentimes guys can practice while they're getting their deal negotiated. It does not seem like we're going to have Shamar Stewart style situation, and hopefully we don't have a Quincy Juckins situation. If you remember, he got into trouble, and then that kind of made the negotiation for his contract get a little weird, and then it took a long time for him to get signed under contract. I mean, almost the whole camp, serve me if I'm correct. But yeah, the 8 of the 10 rookies are signed. Spencer Fano is signed. So only Emmanuel McNeil-Warren and Casey Concepcion, who I think is going to have like a knee scope done in the break after OTAs, which makes sense. He's going to get signed after probably a knee scope gets done. Yeah, rookie contracts aren't as fun to talk about as they were like 20 years ago when there wasn't like a CBA slotting these things and like you were actually negotiating your deal. I know this might sound crazy to some people, but I remember days where you would hear the first pick be announced days before the draft because the team with the number 1 overall pick would have come to terms, right, with the player. I remember that happened with Sam Bradford, who was, I think, the last guy to have that kind of a deal. But Mario Williams, where, you know, before the draft, it's like the Tuesday before the draft, you're like, oh, they agreed to a big deal. They're under contract. Like the guy would literally be under contract or under an agreement to become under contract before the draft even happened. That's unheard of nowadays, but that's how that used to work. But nonetheless, the Browns contract situations, 10 of them, well, 8 out the 10 signed. They're in a pretty good space here. You're going to want to get eyes on Spencer Fano, but you're not really going to be able to get anything useful out of offensive linemen in a rookie minicamp. And honestly, we're probably not going to get anything useful out of Spencer Fano when it comes to like being able to evaluate him till we get some real like one-on-ones, padded one-on-ones, see how he handles team drills and really see how he handles the preseason. But his evaluation is going to be done during the regular season for the most part because we know he's going to play a lot. But yeah, offensive linemen, there's not really much you can tell when it comes to rookie minicamp, right? And in general, right, we should be cautious with what we take away from rookie minicamp. I have seen some headlines and some videos floating around there where people are like, oh my goodness, he looks like let's just take it with a grain of salt. We are at a super early point in the calendar. Optimism is at an all-time high as always during the year at this point, but let's not let that optimism put people on pedestals that you're going to have to remove them from or put people in positions that they're not ready for, right? Like that's my biggest thing. And, you know, one of the things I've learned from doing this job over the last, half a decade, which is sometimes you can overhype a player and that can hurt a player's ability to develop, right? DTR is like the biggest example of it where he played so good so early in the preseason that people got super excited about him. And that excitement turned into energy that ultimately put him on the field way before he should have been there. And I don't think he's ever recovered from that. Even, I got to watch him in person in Birmingham the other day against the Dallas Renegades. And, he's like starting to grow from that experience that he had in Cleveland, right? Where the pressure was just super high, super early. He wasn't ready for it. So, just be careful about how much we're putting on people's stomachs after mini camps, especially if they're like later round draft picks. But Spencer Fano, we're not going to be able to see much from him. We did get to see some stuff from the wide receivers that was more interesting, right? They were running some 7-on-7s. They were running like some individual drills there. I think Casey Concepcion only worked in individuals. He did not do team drills. We saw Denzel Boston some team drills. You expect those guys to look good in those spots. You can see the vision when you get both of them lined up together, right? The vision, the hope for what this wide receiver room could be. They're both very talented guys, and they're both guys who you can see the use case for their talent almost immediately, right? I think Daniel Ofuise, big shout out to him, had a tweet that kind of showed how much motion they were putting Casey Concepcion in when they had him at practice, and how that's reminiscent of what Todd Monken has done with Zay Flowers in the past, right? So, we all kind of thought when they made that selection, and even before the draft, that given his success with somebody like Zay Flowers, that he would try to kind of replicate that, and this would be a good draft to do that, because Mekhi Lemon is somebody that you could see that kind of overlap with. And then Casey Concepcion's main comp was Zay Flowers, right? I think Daniel put this tweet out, some film, so make sure you go follow his Twitter and check him out to see exactly what he's saying. But took a look at Casey's motion usage, my bad. There's a lot of overlap with how Todd Monken used Zay Flowers in Baltimore. Watching the two practices at rookie minicamp only reinforced the idea of a Flowers-like role in Cleveland. So we're starting to see kind of the genesis of what the plan is going to be here with some of these players. And with Casey Concepcion, it looks like Todd Monken sees what everybody else sees, and is going to plan to use Casey Concepcion as kind of a Zay Flowers-like piece in his offensive toolkit. Now, how does he see Denzel Boston? Is that going to be similar to how he used Mike Evans when he was in Tampa? Or, maybe it's more like D-Hop in Baltimore. We're going to talk more about that in just a minute, but I got to thank my sponsor, PrizePicks. PrizePicks is a fun way to earn cash while you watch your favorite teams. No complex betting rules, just pick more or less on a few player stats and lock in your lineup. Here are my picks for this upcoming season, AFC North edition. Jimmy Bernard, I have less than 475. This has to do with volume available in Pittsburgh's offense. Quincy Judkins, I have over 975. Browns improved line. I think the run game's going to be better with it. Chase Brown, under 900 yards. Joe Burrow equals less rushing yards usually for the Bengals offense. Mark Andrews, more than 475 yards. Lamar's going to need a safety blanket. Check to see if PrizePicks is available in your state. You could follow me on the app at Quinn_C to see all my lineups. Download the PrizePicks app today. Play $5 and get $50 in lineup to download the app using the link in the description. So we're kind of starting to see what the plan is for somebody like Casey Concepcion. When it comes to Denzel Boston, I do think it's going to be interesting how they use him. I think Todd's been pretty open about his number one goal here in Cleveland, right? And I think if we're looking at where Todd's going to be judged, I think the run game is going to be somewhere where he's judged. Whatever he's able to get out these quarterbacks, I think is a bonus. I don't think there's any expectation of anything in the Browns front office, in the Browns ownership about what this quarterback room should be, right? Deshaun Watson has already disappointed this team, so anything you get out of this at this point is a bonus, right? And that's how the Browns are viewing it. Money's already spent. We don't have anything else invested in him. We don't really have the future invested in him. So whatever he could give us on the way out, sure, buddy, fine, do it. You know what I mean? If you want to cook on your 2 weeks before you get fired, sure. You know what I mean? With Shador, they only invested a 5th round pick. Dillon, they invested the most in, but even then, it's a third-round pick. It's disposable. The whole room is disposable right now. 6th-round picks, 5th-round picks. We got every day 2, day 3 pick you could imagine in that quarterback room, but it's all really disposable. So whatever you get out that quarterback room, as much as we're going to talk about it because it's the quarterback position, it's not really going to affect how people look at Todd Monken's ability to do his job internally, at least when it comes to him keeping his job past this year. What I think he is looking to judge himself on, if we're talking about Todd and how he's talked about accountability being self-motivated, I think Todd's heavily going to judge his ability to do his job on points scored. Like, that's the big thing that Todd's talked about, right? More than any other position, he's talked about we need to score more points. And I look at this offense, and I think last year what they needed the most was drive finishers. And just in general, the Browns have needed drive finishers on offense, right? One of the reasons I liked the Quincy Judkins draft last year was, he's a drive finisher. You can run the ball on the goal line with Quincy. He going to finish some drives. And to his credit, before he got injured, he was doing that last year. I think Denzel Boston is going to be, or what they hope for Denzel Boston to be, is a drive finisher through the air, right? Because when Todd talks about him, what does he bring up first, right? His red zone stats, his red zone numbers, his red zone production. That doesn't mean that they're not going to use him in other parts of the field. Obviously, they're going to do that. But I do think a chunk of this offense is going to be, hey, we're going to get to the red zone. We're going to let Denzel come down and get some, right, when it comes to touchdowns. And I think that's going to be a huge part to what they want to do, right? I think they see him as a drive finisher. And Todd needs drive finishers because Todd wants to score points. He can't just score points through the ground, right? Sometimes you're going to be in a 3rd and goal, but you're 7 yards back and you can't really run it. So you got to throw it. You got to give a 50-50 ball an opportunity, Now you have a drive finisher in Denzel Boston who can get that opportunity, which even with somebody like David Njoku, who theoretically you would think would be a great drive finisher, but in practice, he was always kind of up and down as a drive finisher, as an end zone jump ball touchdown guy. You got to go all the way back to Braylon Edwards to think of somebody who was decent in those kind of red zone opportunities, maybe even to redacted Winslow. Maybe he was probably one of the better ones that the Browns have had since coming back in '99. Kevin Johnson, we got to go deep into the bag, right, before we find somebody. So I think they really want him to be a drive finisher. I think that's the hope for him, is to be a drive finisher. We'll see what happens there, but it looks like from what we saw from these wide receivers early in rookie camp, people were happy with what they saw there. Emmanuel McNeil-Warren seems to be popping to everybody, making plays, being where he needs to. This is not a surprise to me. Emmanuel McNeil-Warren is such a good football player. Just watching his tape at Toledo, I think he's super smart at the safety position. It looks like he's been playing some free safety. He's super quick to teleport. He could teleport quick spaces, so quick 5-10 area, 5-yard chunks. He can just make up that distance quickly, and then a very hard hitter, a very smart hitter too, in the open field. I feel great about that selection, him being where he is. It's not a surprise to me that he's popping while he's out there, especially against other rookies. I think he should have been a 1st-round pick, and I think he's going to prove that throughout this year. And it would be crazy if the Browns could somehow find a way to manage to get back-to-back defensive rookies of the year to add to a defense that already has Myles Garrett, right? Already has all these pieces on it, and you're adding back-to-back defensive rookies of the year to what was already a top 5 defense. So, I think that could be in the cards for Emmanuel. I'm very excited for him. Cautiously so. I don't want to put too much on him, but I think he'll make an impact during training camp, and then we'll see where he could take that from there. And the last person we're going to talk about, Taylor Green, because he plays quarterback. Because he's giant, right? I think that's what a lot of people see. Giant guy, plays quarterback, runs like a deer. And look, nobody's going to look more amazing in shorts and a T-shirt than Taylor Green, right? That's not the question with him. How he looks like in camp and with pads on, that's the question with Taylor Green, right? He has a lot of things he needs to clean up from a mechanical standpoint, and mechanics are easy to work on when you ain't gonna get hit, right? But once that pressure's real, all of a sudden the mechanics start to get a little shaky, right? Once you start to get tired, which in practice is hard to get tired, right? And to Todd's credit, Todd's been running a pretty hard camp, but that those are the things that are going to kind of test it. So yeah, with Taylor, it's nice to see that he's able to demonstrate those tools, that athletic ability. But from what we know about his college career, you should probably wait to make any declarations about him in the positive or negative until we start to see him in pads doing some live action. And even then, look at him as a long-term project, not a short-term project. Maybe somebody you can gimmick up an offense around and then work something functional there for a couple of years. But that's kind of the hope there with Taylor Green. Overall, from what we've heard about this rookie camp, seems like Todd is running a pretty long and pretty exhaustive camp or practices so far. That's kind of been the theme from people who have been there. To be fair, we heard the same thing about Kevin last year, and it didn't really mean much, right? So, I'm not trying to get too carried away, but this is stuff I like to hear, right? I like to hear that the practices feel productive. It seems like everybody is walking away thinking that these are productive. I think physicality and making sure your practices are pretty exhaustive as far as like the amount of information given, but just like physically exhausting too, is important for preparation for football, because it's exhausting to play football, right? It's physical to play football. So I like that I'm hearing those things about this camp. Again, it doesn't mean that we're going to start off the season 9-0, right? They did a physical camp last year, or a more physical camp than Stefanski did last year, than Stefanski normally did last year. And, the start of the season was still slow. Ultimately, no matter how physical the camp is, no matter how much I like how the Browns run camp, I'm going to keep in mind that I expect this team to start slow just because of the pure logistics of it, right? 6 new offensive linemen, 5 new starters more than likely, and even if you only replace 4, one of those starters is Ethan Posick, who not Ethan Posick, but it's Luke Whippler, who wasn't really a starter last year. So 5 new starters on that offensive line, 2 new starters in that wide receiver room, only really returning from your pass attack last year, Harold Fannin, Isaiah Bond, and Jerry Jeudy, right? Like, those are the only 3 guys returning. We don't know who the quarterback's going to be. Either it's going to be Deshaun Watson, who's coming off another 700-day layoff, or a young, inexperienced quarterback in Shedeur Sanders. So that's going to add more time to this whole project, right? Like, it's probably going to take a while for this offense to hit its stride and start to demonstrate the vision for it long term. And we might not get the quarterback play that allows us to see the full vision, maybe only part of the vision. But either way, these are still the kind of things you want to hear. Not going to take it and say the Browns are going to win 8 of their first 9 or something silly like that. But understanding that, it's part of the process, and it's something that you like to hear as part of the process. But that's the rookie minicamp update so far. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Y'all got a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.